Hello, this is Amfortas again with part 2 of my podcast called Give a Dog a Bad Name and Expect to Get Bitten. In part 1, I gave a lot of detail from contemporary research which shows the systematic destruction of masculine reputation foisted on us by an anti-male media driven by the education women receive from our universities. Men are rubbished and calumnised daily. Good men, ordinary hard-working men, family men. The good name of men is soiled at every opportunity by ordinary women repeating feminist agitprop. Women have eagerly adopted the habit of disrespecting men, making it a sardonic sport, so much so that even an early feminist like Doris Lessing is horrified at the destructiveness, callousness, crudity, and downright lies. What can men do about it? What are men doing about it? Men are generally doers rather than talkers, present company accepted, and when good men stop doing what good men do, women lose out. Anthony Nazaro, writing for the National Organization of Men, has pointed to incidents, behavioral trends. Let's look at some. The Baltic Sea. Estonian-Swedish ferry sinks. Over 800 people die. A disproportionate number of women drown. Many say that the law of the sea, women and children first, was forgotten, and law of the jungle, every man for himself, prevailed. The screams of women drowning were heard by many men, it was reported. Montreal, Canada. 14 women students were killed by a mentally disturbed man. Many media commentators were bothered by the fact that male students didn't risk their lives in an attempt to protect the women. Feminists use this as yet another male-bashing exercise. They have an annual protest accusing those boys and all men of being complicit. New York City, the Twin Tower bombings. In the panic to get out of the buildings, some women reported of being shoved out of elevators by men. One or two of the 300-odd firemen who died in the inferno, perhaps. Was it the actual case that women were pushed out? Maybe it was just a whine from a woman or two who broke a heel. But men were criticised in a tragedy. On the radio in the UK, a lost child, a little girl, is reported as found wandering the aisles of a businessman's train from Glasgow. Women phoned in condemning men on the train for not helping the child. Their tone is heated, bordering on calls for lynching. The many business women passengers who did not help are not mentioned. A small girl wanders from a kindergarten in England. She drowns in a pond. A manhunt looks for a van seen in the area. The man is found and cleared, but is vilified for not stopping to help a wandering child. He says, "I was afraid to talk to a strange child and be accused of being a pedophile." In the book Male and Female, a study of the sexes in a changing world, there appears an opinion that men have to learn to want to provide and protect others. And this behaviour being learned is fragile and can disappear rather easily under social conditions that no longer teach it or deride it. Phyllis Schlafly, a well-known American writer, has written that male soldiers are now being trained to disregard female soldiers' pain and suffering if captured, since the sexual assault of a US female POW during the Gulf War, who turned out not to have been sexually assaulted at all, by the way. She is afraid if this attitude gets out into the general public, it could be devastating to male-female relationships. Well, it has, and it is. Destroying chivalry by continually criticizing it and blaming men for being polite and helpful is one thing, but are women willing to forfeit the paternal feeling that most men still have for them? Ow, now there is a provocative word. But when did feminists ever keep to real meanings of words? Paternalistic used to be a positive word, rubbished by feminists. Many men are no longer more outraged by women being abused than by men being abused. Today, men are starting to refuse to see themselves as the providers and protectors of women. In an equal world, why should they be? The provider-protector role, we are told, is oppressive. This archetypal male role has been rubbished by feminists and their legions of media whores and legislators. Women are hardly noted for stirring themselves to provide for and protect men. Quite the opposite, in fact. Every opportunity to abandon men is taken, as Doris Lessing pointed out in disgust at her feminist sisters. Women can take back the night on the one-way streets all they like. Feminist legal scholar and harpy Professor Catherine McKinnon has said that the increase in domestic violence and rape are symptomatic of male attitude towards women. Ha! She would say that, wouldn't she? What increase? Listeners may like to get a transcript of this podcast with its footnotes and citations, proving her not only completely wrong, but deliberately so. She speaks absolute nonsense. There has been a consistent decrease in domestic violence and rape against women in all Western countries. It is women's domestic violence and false allegations of rape which has seen a marked increase. More lies and vilification from the women's studies departments infecting our universities and our legal system. But then, what can one expect from such a rabid liar as Professor McKinnon? She emulates Professor Mary Koss, who fabricated the infamous and ubiquitous 1 in 4 women raped statistic by deliberately falsifying self-selected data collected through the feminist Ms. magazine. Despite being exposed and torn apart by Christina Hoff Sommers in her book Who Stole Feminism, there is barely a women's magazine in circulation that has not continued to repeat this wicked lie to terrify its readers and turn them against decent men. Liars, men haters. Women professors of lies are to be found in every Australian university too. Professors whose careers have been made as rent-seeking scum, founded on the most outrageous personal and professional falsity. Could feminism's agitprop gender politics, designed to suborn women, have changed men's attitudes so that men now see men and women as just people? Have feminists pushed women off the pedestal? Perhaps they have opened men's eyes to an historical confidence trick. Is this a good condition for our society? According to a recent poll, many fewer men would give up their seats in a lifeboat to a woman today. Quite a difference from the 1912 Titanic disaster, where mostly women were saved, even more than children. In a riot, disaster or war, will it mean every man and woman for themselves? Many men today demand that women be obligated for the draft and combat along with men. Mel Feit of the National Centre for Men in the USA has stated that a male body isn't any more capable of withstanding a bullet than a female body. Women hold political office and boardroom positions and are police officers, and some are even firefighters. Why should men still risk their lives to protect them? Geraldo Rivera, on a show regarding male-female violence, stated, "The way I was brought up, men should always protect women." But isn't this attitude patronising and demeaning? Feminists tell everyone it is, taking every opportunity to berate men. Some women call this equally respectful attitude misogynistic. What a friggin' nerve! Some men call this result of societal equality poetic justice. If being equally respected is what women want, then perhaps women could make a start on being respectful and change history and her story while they're at it. They have had several generations of feminism and equality, but seem yet to make that start. Meanwhile, being equally disrespected could be a natural and inevitable byproduct of their systematic disdain, even if backfiring on women. It seems to me that to stop this rot in society, and specifically the media law-sponsored forced redundancy of men, will need a revolution in society, maybe brought about by a calamity. If, say, an invasion was to occur, and men were to turn their backs on the defence of the nation, as we are now redundant, what would the prevailing attitude of the female gender be then? If such an invading force was one that sees women as nothing more than chattels to be used, abused and discarded at whim, would we then see men as good for something? Ah yes, we would be good at defending the freedoms and advancements that these women claim that they have gained for themselves. This shows that the claims of the feminazis have made in respect to the advancement of women are nothing without the men to protect and ensure those gains. They are only guaranteed existence by a willingness of men to uphold them. But why should men stand up and defend the rights of the feminazis and their followers, who label men as redundant, violent, abusive, child abusers, perverts, rapists, etc., as they are fond of vomiting in the mainstream media? Remember the feminist catchphrase, "All men are rapists." Perhaps it will never come to be that men will, en masse, turn their backs in such a situation, as we all have mothers, sisters, daughters, and female relatives whom we hold dear to our hearts. But even these are increasingly disrespecting men, divorcing and dispossessing their husbands, and estranging themselves and their children from their fathers. Children, particularly girls, are developing an horrendous image of men, starting with their fathers. They will grow totally distrustful of men altogether. Boys' self-esteem is terrible as they look to a future when they too will become the men they see portrayed. There is a self-fulfilling prophecy bearing down on us. 80% of divorces are initiated by wives wanting to rid themselves of the men Doris Lessing spoke about. Nice men, intelligent men, kind men. These men are deliberately mislabeled and dragged into the family court, sometimes by policemen who have thrown them out of their homes on false allegation. Men are dispossessed of their homes and their families in the best interest of children. Adolf Hitler's wicked phrase. It is not only men's image that is ruined. Men just might leave all women to themselves. It will not be from anger. Despite being so mistreated, men in general have not shown anger toward women. But men are feeling profoundly disappointed, delusioned, and disgusted. Western women have not raised any objection to being manipulated by feminism. Instead, they have embraced its seductive, destructive mantras and mendacities. They punish faultless men who they see as all the same, all bad. They have permitted calumny and few have raised objection like Doris Lessing. They have chosen to follow a pernicious and socially destructive Marxist feminist agitprop path to a bed of their own making that they have to lie in, alone. No doubt they will blame men for being commitment phobic. Thank you for listening, and I hope it has given you some food for thought, especially the women who might have bothered to listen to a mere man. Please pass a link to this podcast and its first part to a friend or two. My thanks also go to men's rights activist Christian J for his production assistance, and to the activism group at antimisandry.com for their suggestions. I dedicate this podcast to my estranged daughter, for whom I grieve, and my beloved son, in whom I am well pleased. Ask, who does the Grail serve?